Boom! Yes, folks, Hume here again. How are you going? This video is the first in a series where we're going to discuss the negative sign. We're going to talk about negative numbers. We're going to discuss the arithmetic of the negative sign, the arithmetic of negative numbers. We're going to do so across the four basic operations of multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. We're going to talk about fractions. We're going to talk about squares and square roots. All right? But before we get into the arithmetic, I want to just talk very briefly of the philosophy behind the negative sign. All right? It's always nice to discuss the philosophy of mathematics in general. It's always nice to discuss the philosophy of a particular topic. So there we go. All right? More than anything else, the negative sign, like every other symbol in mathematics, is a conveyor of meaning. It says something. Sometimes it might be an instruction to do something. Sometimes it might be telling you about the state of something. But it's about communication. It's just like your normal, natural language when you're speaking using words. When you're speaking using numbers and symbols, the general idea is the same. The idea is that you want to convey a meaning. It means something. In any particular topic where you come across the negative sign, it means something. In any particular situation where you have to deal with the negative sign, it means something. So anytime you see the negative sign in general, understand that even before you get into the details of the mathematics, understand that the negative sign is placed there as a communicator. Right? It's telling you something. It is saying that this particular situation means something. What it means would depend on each situation. It would depend on each topic. Every topic carries its own particular language, its own particular jargon, and within that construct, the negative sign would have a specific meaning in each topic. So anytime you're studying a particular topic, it is always important to understand what the negative sign means particular to that topic. Right? So some simple examples, right? If you're talking about straight lines, coordinate geometry, the gradient of a straight line, right? A negative gradient means something. A positive gradient means something else, right? If you're talking about indices, powers, a negative index or a negative power means something as opposed to a positive index or a positive power. All right? If you're talking about, let me say, you're talking about the motion of particles, and you're talking about velocity, how fast something is traveling, right? A negative velocity has a particular meaning as opposed to a positive velocity. See? If we're talking about location, right? The more technical term is displacement, right? A negative displacement has a particular meaning. A positive displacement also has a particular meaning. All right? I'm trying to be very careful with what I say and how I say it. Right? So, and those are just a few topics. There are so many other topics in maths where the negative sign is present and it means something. Right? What I'm going to do, however, in this series of videos, I'm going to use money. And I'm going to use the language of money to convey a particular sense of trying to illustrate the negative sign. trying to demonstrate that, hey, we could make sense of this using money, because as we know, money is so ubiquitous, and I'm using the word ubiquitous deliberately because it's ubiquitous. Right? What does the word ubiquitous mean? The word ubiquitous means present, appearing, or found everywhere. So in other words, you come in a video to talk about maths and you get vocabulary too. That is how we just do it here. Right? So let me give you the spelling as well. Right? U-B-I-Q-U-I-T-O-U-S. If you're not sure about the pronunciation, U, right? B, ubiquitous. Yeah? Right, that's the pronunciation. Ubiquitous. Or, if you want to be a little more stush, you can say B instead of B. Ubiquitous. I think it's more B than B. Ubiquitous, right? So let me change that B to B. Let me make it a little more concise, right? Ubiquitous. That's sounding good. Nice. So the ubiquitous nature of money allows me the chance to try to demonstrate the working of the negative number, because I've found over the years that in a lot of situations I'll be explaining something to a group of students, or maybe to one individual student, and you're trying to get your point across and they're just not getting it. They're not getting it at all. But the minute I use an example where I'm with money, boom, suddenly everything clicks. And the reason for that is simply because of familiarity. Again, ubiquitous, right? It is there, it is ever present. And we're so familiar with it that we find ourselves using it and applying arithmetic to money even without a knowledge of the rules of arithmetic, right? So there are people who didn't finish school. There are people who didn't pass maths, but put money in their hand in a situation where they had to deal with the money. Money coming in, money going out, right? And you wouldn't know that they had problems with maths in school. That is the ubiquitous nature of money, and that is why in this series of videos I'm going to use money to illustrate the negative numbers in the hope that, having seen it illustrated in a context that you're already familiar with, you could then take the next step, which is to practice the thing that we illustrate. You get some questions now. Just to practice, to get a rhythm, to get a flow, to get the timing of working with the negative numbers, having seen it illustrated, using something that we're already familiar with. All right? So there is a series of exercises. Yeah, boy. There is a series of exercises that are tied to this series of videos. So for example, I would have a separate video on multiplication. I would have a separate video on division, a separate video on addition, and a separate video on subtraction. And each one of those videos would have exercises. All right? And for each exercise, there will be a section of the video where I discuss the questions in that exercise. So it is important for those of us who need to go through that practice, to listen to what I'm saying, see what I'm doing for each section, and then apply it to practice, right? Practice is the most important thing. Listening to me is one thing, understanding what I say is one thing, but you have to practice too. All right? So these videos would be constructed, and the exercises are constructed with the weakest students in mind. And I say weakest students guardedly because they are students who are nowhere close to being weak. They might just be lazy. Yeah? They might not have the discipline. Right? Whatever it is, are constructed specifically with the weakest students in mind. So even in the case where somebody genuinely, let me say somebody genuinely having real problems with this man, and they're willing to sit down with it and fight, yeah, that's what my exercises are about. For the rare case where somebody's so bad at maths that they have to sit down and spend 3 hours to understand the multiplication of negative numbers, or the division of negative numbers, or the addition or the subtraction of negative numbers. If you need 3 hours, you could use my exercises once you're willing to spend the 3 hours. That is the whole point. Point being that just do it. Don't be put off by how slow you think you are. Just put yourself in a situation where you're not under a deadline and take as much time as you need. So that is the whole point of the exercise. Of course, most students may not need all of the details. Some students might need 1 or 2 parts of it. No problem. Whatever the situation is, it is there for you. Alright, so get ready, hop on board, take it section by section. Whatever you need to get out of it, take and use it.